Whether you are a small-time producer or a large manufacturing unit, you need to participate in the market. You should be given the rights. AAEC agreement, which means appreciable adverse effect on competition agreements. Anti-competitive agreements is there when there are two or more people coming into the picture, and in the case of the abuse dominant, it can be done by a single party itself. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Unit 5, Commercial Law, where we are going to speak about the Competition Act of 2002. Now, it's very important that in the modern days, no company can survive without competition. In every single business that we are seeing, there is competition, and you need to go ahead of this competition to stay in the market. Now, when you talk about any business for that matter, be it a .com, be it manufacturing, or be it a retail company, but the competition still is alive. But what happens here is that the competition makes the company go in all ways, go in all the shortcuts and try to cut against each other, create a monopoly altogether. In order to stop that, in order to safeguard every single person, in order to have a healthy competition, we have this act called as the Competition Act of 2002. Now, competition is the act of the sellers individually seeking to acquire the patronage of buyers in order to achieve profits or market share. That's what we are always so interested about, being competitive. But what does the Competition Act of 2002 says, which was enacted by the Parliament of India, says that it is in effect to the Indian competition law, which means to say that we are in a position to stop that monopolistic act altogether. We do not want monopolies in the market. The reason for this act to come was to make everybody participate in the competition. We don't want one person to dominate the entire scenario. We want people to understand that there is opportunity for everybody to be present, to participate, and to sell their products or services. Now, after the enactment of the 2002 Act, it has been amended twice, once in the year 2007 and in the year 2009. So twice we have amended this particular act, and two main features of this Competition Act of 2002 is the framework that it provides for the establishment of the Competition Commission and the tools it provides to prevent anti-competitive practices, to promote positive competition in the Indian market. What are we actually trying to do is that we are trying to prevent the anti-competitive factors. We are trying to prevent monopoly coming into the market. We are trying to prevent one dominant position in the market. We know that there are certain companies in the Indian market who have the prowess to take over the market, who have the power to take over the entire share, who have the power to gain the financial aspects. But what happens to those young, small companies who also want to come up, who also want to earn profits, and who also want to deliver to their customer expectations? So that's where you need a stringent law that would prevent this monopoly, that would prevent the anti-competitive activities, so that everybody gets a space to survive in this market. Now, moving forward, the objectives of the Competition Act. Now, the Act seeks to provide legal framework and tools to ensure competitive policies are met to prevent anti-competition practices and provide penalization for such acts. Amazon is a well-known name in the Indian subcontinent. Probably hundreds and thousands and millions of people order goods from Amazon. But what is the problem with Amazon? Why Amazon has been called up by the CCI, the Competition Council of India? Why? Because many a times if you see that the monopoly that Amazon has created over the buyers and sellers activity is quite disheartening, because Amazon tries to go into a market and completely cover it, not allowing the small time traders to come inside. So that's where we want to ensure that the anti-competition, you might be a great seller, you might have great products, you are a big brand, you are universally present, no doubt about it. But why do you want to come into a position where you don't want to allow other people to come up? So what does the Anti-Competition Act says? That we will penalize you if you try to monopoly the market, if you try to go into a picture, if you go to try into a situation where others are not able to trade. We want a free and fair competition which protects the freedom of trade. Trade is an activity where you are able to find the right buyer for your product. Your product might be of any range, any quality. What happens here is that, but if the sellers find there is some meaning in your product, then they want to buy it. They do not want them to be restricted by only one particular seller. Now, what happens here is that when one seller starts dominating the market, the concept of trade goes away and the concept of monopoly just comes inside. Trade is something where everybody should be given a chance to compete. Everybody should be given a fair chance. Everybody should be given that equality in terms of trading. But unfortunately, no, every single market in this world is dominated either by a particular group or by a consortium which tries to actually make competition very difficult. Now, moving further, the Act seeks to prevent monopolies and unnecessary intervention by the government. First thing is that let us frame a framework for the Competition Commission of India, and to prevent monopolies and promote competition in the market. Now, what has happened after the growth of e-commerce in India is that everybody wants to dominate the space. Starting from Flipkart, starting from Zomato, or you're going to talk about Myntra, or you're going to talk about Ajio.com, or you're going to talk about any other e-commerce vendors altogether. Everybody wants to dominate the space because they have understood the power of internet. They have understood that to reach a customer, all it requires is one mobile phone with an internet connection, which is able to download the app, and then they have the customer in their hands. So they have the data, they have the analytics of understanding and getting the customer into their bind. But what happens here is that if I am allowing only a particular sector of the Indian economy to survive and make others completely go back, completely restricted, then I'm not promoting competition, I'm promoting monopoly. In fact, I will also go to the level of oligopoly because they might form cartels. I do not want to seek a country which is completely cartelized. I don't want to seek a country where everybody is not given a chance to promote their trade or business. I want to seek a country where competition has a framework, competition has a definition. Whether you are a small-time producer or a large manufacturing unit, you need to participate in the market. You should be given the rights to exercise your freedom in terms of participation, in terms of delivering your goods, in terms of getting your customer what exactly he or she wants. So that's why the Competition Commission of India ensures that let us not intervene, let the government should not come into the picture, neither we should allow the privatization or the complete monopoly of big private companies to take over the market. We want to keep the competition spirit intact. We want to ensure that everybody is enjoying the spirit of competition. Everybody is able to move forward altogether. But we do not want to seek a situation where every time government intervenes, starts passing the law and says that A can participate and B should not participate. So in order to avoid that, this particular act was brought into picture. Followed by the freedom of trade and participating individuals and entities in the market. When Walmart wanted to come into India, the problem was very simple. The problem was that why should we allow Walmart into India? Because the small-time traders felt that Walmart will dominate over the Kirana shops by buying it at a very, very low price and creating a vast kingdom of retail enterprise. Now, today when we talk about Reliance itself, what does Reliance do with the hypermarket model in place? Or what does Metro do with the hypermarket model in place? What they typically try to do is that they dominate over the entire place. They take over all these small-time traders by pricing their products extremely low, by which the consumers get attracted only to this big hypermarket malls, and these small-time traders who want to sell their products are left in lurch. So that is exactly what is happening is competition is becoming one-sided. We don't want that. We want the competition for every individual to remain the same. You have a product, you have the right to sell the product. You have a place to go ahead and sell it. Nowadays, even if you start looking into the automobile sector, there was a time when there used to be small-time traders in terms of selling their cars and automobiles. But today, when you look into cars24.com or when you start looking in cardeco.com, all these kind of e-commerce related apps that are there in your mobile, now they start dominating the entire space of reselling. So what happens in the long run, nobody is ready to take over and run the show, and this becomes quite disturbing in the long run. They're not able to continue, they're not able to make anything out of it. So if we have to protect the interest of the consumer also, we also have to keep in mind that the consumer has a particular taste. The consumer has a particular choice. His interests, his ideas, his opinions have to be respected. And that's why we need this Competition Act coming into picture. Followed by, in simple words, the anti-competitive agreements are agreements which are made by two or more companies competing in the same market in terms of reducing the price of stock to manipulate the market favorably for them. Now, when you talk about the retail space, whom can you think about? None other greater than the Reliance itself. Or when you are going to talk about Amazon coming into a retail space altogether. Now, what both of them try to do here is that whether it's going to be Reliance or Metro or Amazon or Flipkart, or let it be Big Basket, Grofers, all those kind of companies which are there in the system, what they try to do is typically try to dominate that space. They try to get into an agreement where they decide that they will reduce the price and they will sell it. By which what happens is that the company is reducing the competition in the market, which adversely affects the end consumer or the end customer. The reason is that now the consumer is left with not more choice. He is not able to pick a choice at all. He has to go to these shops only because they are the lowest. Now, the days have come in India in such a way that the moment you want to buy something, people don't go to the shop, people don't go to the malls and compare the price. What they do is just open the mobile, compare it in Amazon.com. Moment in Amazon, you are able to get a price. I think nobody else is able to deliver a lower price than Amazon at any given point of time. So now what happens is that Amazon becomes the reference point for a consumer in terms of purchase. People compare with that price and see whether you get something lesser than Amazon, and definitely nobody else can go below than Amazon because he has the power to dominate the market. So in the long run, what happens is that the end consumer is affected, plus all the small-time entities are also affected. So this is going to be a very challenging situation for you and me in terms of getting into the anti-competitive agreements. Followed by, the Competition Act defines anti-competitive agreements in section 3, which is very, very important, where they say no enterprise or association of enterprises or individual or association of individual may enter into an agreement regarding production, supply, distribution, storage, acquisition, control, or provision of goods and services which will adversely affect the competition of the Indian market. So it is very, very clearly given here that no individual or group of organization or entities will get into an act of distribution, storage, acquisition, control, and supply. Basically, if you start controlling the demand and supply factors in the market, you have automatically started creating a monopoly. That's what the government exactly wants you to stop. The government does not want you to have a complete command over the demand and supply. What is happening is that they are trying to build in an entire system which will go ahead and stop the entire market, which we do not want. We want a system where people can just go in and take it in terms of building up the market. So this is what we are looking into. Followed by such agreements are termed as AAEC agreement, which means appreciable adverse effect on competition agreements. This act expressly states that such agreement shall be void, which means they will not be taken as a regular valid contract. So this is considered to be void in nature. You cannot get into a contract, you cannot get into an agreement which will create an adverse effect on the Indian market. So we call those agreements as void. An AAEC agreement may be classified in the following ways. Directly affects the purchase or sale prices. That's what we are seeing today in the market. Indirectly affecting the purchase or sale, the mindset, the psychological consumer behavior aspects, limits the production or limits the supply. So as I was trying to say, the demand and supply factor, if you are going to dominate the demand and supply factor phase altogether, then definitely we are landing in trouble which cannot be taken at any point of time. So that's why I want to say that anti-competitive agreements have to be completely looked into, and you cannot promote anti-competitive agreements in our country. The next thing is that it limits the technical development. Let me also talk about this for a while. Why? Because Google had this kind of problem. Google started creating apps for every single thing in this world. Now, when you go into the Google workspace, whether it's been a calendar, a clock, a time factor, or you are going to draw a spreadsheet, or you're going to do something regarding a Google Meet, everywhere what Google tries to do is that technically build itself as a superior workspace area and try to dominate the entire market. Now, what happens here is that for the other companies, they feel that it's quite difficult to challenge Google and come into the market space because it's already there and that's what people are following. So what happens here is that the limitation in technical development is also challenged. Today, people do not want to start seeking an alternative for a WhatsApp or for a Twitter or for a Telegram because they are superiorly dominating. They've already covered that space. So when you start building in Indian variation-based applicants into that particular area, it becomes very difficult to sell and it becomes very difficult to convince the people that there is an equivalent app altogether. So the limitation in terms of technical development is very much, followed by service provision in the market. Now, that's also a very big challenge. Why? Because the amount of network, financial strength, and the reach capabilities for Google is very, very high when compared to that of other companies. So the small companies, they get limited in service, leads to the rigging of bids, because now today nobody would go in for the bid. There's only one particular person. Now, if there is another person, he has to join hands in terms of collusive bidding and the abuse of dominant position. So definitely you land up in a position where you see that you are in a dominant position. You control the market completely. So that is why these anti-competitive agreements are not offered. They are supposed to be banned. Now, the abuse of dominant position is prohibited under the Section 4 of the Competition Act, which clearly says that according to this act, at any point of time, if an enterprise enjoys the position and power in the Indian market to operate, which enables it to operate independently of the competitive forces, affects its competition, consumer, or the relevant market altogether. So what we try to say here is that according to this act, any dominant position means any enterprise that enjoys the position and power in Indian market. So when they enjoy the power and position, they start working independently of the competitive forces in the relevant market. So what happens here is that they are able to work across by their own borders, by their own means altogether, and they affect the competition with the consumer also. Now, for example, a predatory pricing. A predatory pricing is a practice that is seen as an abuse in the dominant position. What is a predatory pricing? You put a price in such a way where it engages, where it makes the customer to get completely hooked. You put a very, very nice price tag, a lowest level price tag. You try to go and capture customer, lure the customers towards yourself by putting the lowest price. So in that sense, what happens is the enterprise becomes a dominant enterprise, enables itself into the AAC Acts, and consider itself as an abuse factor. So this is what leads it to an abuse philosophy or a sector altogether. So we don't want this predatory pricing. We don't want to have a psychological impact or any kind of indirect impact on the markets. Now, the difference between the definition of anti-competitive and the abuse of dominant is the position that anti-competitive agreements is there when there are two or more people coming into the picture, and in the case of the abuse dominant, it can be done by a single party itself, but the party has to be in the dominant position. Like Amazon, for example. Amazon has that dominant position so much that they can create an abuse factor. Why? Because they have a very, very nice way of putting in the pricing segment altogether by which they attract all the customers across every single segment. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the ideas and opinions shared through this session would be of a great help and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we shall see more about the competitive laws and how they are coming as a challenge in the upcoming days. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.